always wanted to do that. So today, I am at Reebok headquarters here in Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been doing some photography and video work for a gymnastics seminar that they're actually running here on site all weekend. I've been shooting all day yesterday and all day today. So today, I wanted to do some filming for YouTube. This is absolutely the coolest athletic facility I've ever been to. So before we jump into the video, we're gonna have a little bit of fun. So I used to do like a lot of gymnastics type stuff, and that's kind of right there my baseline on whether or not I'm fit anymore. Like, can I still do a muscle up? And if I can, I'm like, okay, good. But if I can't, then I need to fix myself. So that was the baseline check right there. So we're still good. But part of the reason why I wanted to make this video today is because I'm getting to test out a ton of really cool gear this weekend. And so the one really cool thing that I want to talk about is the Sony a7R4. So as you know, I shoot on the Sony a7 III, which is what I'm videoing on right now. But this a7R4 takes things to a completely different level. So in addition to that, I also have the Sony 135mm f1.8 G Master lens, as well as the 70-200 f2.8 G Master lens. Not gonna talk a ton about those two things today, but the a7R4, that is the topic of conversation for today. So as you guys already know, my main camera that I use is the Sony a7 III, which I'm shooting on right now, and it's an awesome camera, but this legitimately takes it to a whole nother level. So the first thing that you'll notice when you're looking at the spec sheet of this camera versus that camera is that this has a 61 megapixel sensor, whereas that only has a 24 megapixel sensor. I've never actually shot on a camera that has more than a 24 megapixel sensor, and I've never really had an issue with the resolution there. So I'm very curious to see how much better a 61 megapixel sensor is, and like how it looks on my computer and just how that works, because I haven't had any experience with it in the past. In addition to that, one of the really cool things about this is that it has an upgraded EVF as well as an upgraded LCD screen. So on the a7 III, you can kind of tell where Sony took some of the funding away from it or took some money away from it, and they kind of cheaped out on the LCD screen, in my opinion, as well as the electronic viewfinder, but they certainly did not with this. The electronic viewfinder and the LCD screen on this are much higher quality. On my a7 III, sometimes I'll notice that like the LCD screen literally does not have very good dynamic range on the back of it, and things will look blown out on the back of my camera, but when I put the footage onto my computer, it looks completely fine, just because I think that back LCD is a little bit cheaper, and I have not noticed that at all with this camera, the a7R4. And now the Sony a7R4 is equipped with Sony's real-time autofocus tracking, so it does a much better job of tracking people's faces and their eyes and just tracking objects in general when you lock on the focus using real-time autofocus. Honestly, I didn't think it was going to make that big of a difference because the autofocus on this a7 III is so good already, but now that I'm using it and I'm actually shooting sports and things like that with it, it makes such a big difference. The autofocus on this, for sports specifically, is far superior to that of the a7 III. The one thing that's not on the spec sheet that I would argue is probably the most important part of this camera is the actual redesigned body of it. This camera is made completely differently than that of the a7 III. The first thing you'll notice when you grab this is that the grip on it is much, much beefier. As you can see here, my pinky is actually completely on the grip, whereas on that camera, my pinky is constantly falling off the bottom. So when you're using big lenses like this Sony G Master 70-200, it feels really, really heavy on my a7 III, whereas on this a7R4, it feels perfectly well balanced. And honestly, the grip on this is superior to some of the Canon and Nikon DSLRs that I've used in the past, which is really saying something, because my biggest complaint about Sony for a long time has been the grip. But with the a7R4, they really have fixed that problem. You'll also notice, in addition to the change on the grip, they also changed the buttons on the back of the camera. They're much beefier and just better feeling than they are on the a7 III. They feel like they're more well built and potentially have better weather sealing and things like that. And you'll also notice on the top that all the dials now have locking mechanisms, which personally, it's not that big of a deal for me. I don't really have any issues accidentally knocking dials on the top of my a7 III, but it is a nice feature to have, especially if you're putting this camera in and out of a bag and you don't want to accidentally tweak some of the dials. So I love all the new upgrades to this camera. The bigger grip is awesome. The improved autofocus is incredible. But those things I would categorize kind of as like nice to haves. They're not necessarily necessities. They're not things that I need. And the only thing I think that would warrant me upgrading from my A7 III to this, the A7R4, is the image quality. And so I gotta wrap up this gig for the rest of the day. I got like 3 or 4 more hours of shooting to do, and then gonna head back to Buffalo, edit these photos, and I'll talk to you guys about what I think about the camera and the image quality. So my biggest concern with using the A7R4 is actually how big the files are gonna be. I have no idea how many megabytes each of the files are gonna be. I have no idea how my computer is gonna react to them. So that's my biggest concern. I'm actually super excited to see how good 61 megapixels looks on my computer, but I have a slight concern about just the power and the compute capabilities of my computer as it relates to editing gigantic files like that. I know on my A7 III with the 24 megapixel files, it edits them perfectly. The transfer speeds are fantastic, and the way that the photos react in Lightroom is almost instantaneous. But I need to figure out if that's the same with this 61 megapixel sensor. So now let's wrap up this gig. Got a little bit more shooting to do, and then I'll talk to you guys when I'm back in Buffalo. See you in a bit. What's up, YouTube? We are back in Buffalo, and I am dressed up right now because I'm actually about to head in to the office. But I wanted to wrap up this video and give you my thoughts on the A7R4 after using it for a couple of days. But first things first, if you like the B-roll in the first part of the video, definitely give this video a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button. We're almost at 1,600 subscribers, which is absolutely insane. Almost at this for a complete year now. I think it's about 2 or 3 more weeks, then it'll be like my 1-year anniversary of being on YouTube, so super pumped about that. Definitely hit the subscribe button down below if you enjoyed the video. So let's jump into the conclusion here. The A7R4 is an amazing camera, and it is a fantastic reason to upgrade from something like the A7 III. However, I personally will not be upgrading to the A7R4, and it's literally just because of one simple reason, and that reason is file size. On my Sony cameras, I always shoot in compressed RAW format. There's 2 options when you want to shoot in RAW, compressed and uncompressed. Compressed makes the file size considerably smaller without losing much or any quality, really. Uncompressed, the file sizes can be absolutely astronomical, so I always shoot in compressed. It's a little bit more consistent. On my A7 III, the file sizes typically end up between like 23 and 24 megabytes, whereas on the A7R4, the file sizes, when I was shooting it, ended up between like 58 and 60 megabytes, which is about 2.5 times the size of what I'm currently shooting on my A7 III. That might sound like it's not that much, but when you start to understand my workflow and the way that I process my photos and store them and things of that nature, 2.5 times increase in file size is gigantic. So just to give you a high-level overview of what my workflow looks like, to start, when I'm out in the field, I like to be able to take as many photos as I want. I don't want something in the back of my head telling me, like, hey, don't take any more photos because you've already shot 100 gigs of photos. I don't want to ever have to worry about that. And with my A7 III, it really gives me the ability to do that because of the smaller file size. When I get home, I end up taking all of my photos, I dump them onto my hard drive where they automatically start backing up into the cloud. And so because the A7R4 has a 2.5x increase in terms of file size, it doubles the amount of storage consumed on my SD card, it doubles the amount of storage consumed on my local hard drive, it doubles the amount of storage backed up into the cloud, and it increases the amount of time it takes for my computer to sync to the cloud by 2.5x. And when you start to understand all of that and all of the repercussions of that, that is the reason why I'm not quite ready to upgrade to the A7R4 just yet. In addition to the massive file size increase, I did notice that Lightroom and Photoshop on my computer were a little bit slower in processing the files. Honestly, it wasn't as tremendous as I thought it was going to be. I do have a pretty solid computer. I use the 5K iMac. It's like the 27-inch standard iMac, but it has an i5 processor, it has a GPU in it, and it does a pretty damn good job. It was a little bit slower with the A7R4 files, but honestly, that wasn't really the biggest reason in terms of why I don't want to upgrade to it. Processing the files in Lightroom was completely fine. A little bit slower, but completely fine. However, if you do not care about file size and you're looking for an upgrade to your current camera, especially if you're shooting on the Sony system already, the A7R4 is literally amazing. The upgraded grip is fantastic. The upgraded sensor is literally out of this world. I have never shot on a 61 megapixel sensor before, and it's insane how much cropping you can do on those files and barely notice that the photo is even cropped. In addition to that, the real-time autofocus functionality on it is absolutely ridiculous. I was using it shooting that gymnastics seminar over the weekend, and I never missed autofocus or missed focus on any of my photos, even when I was shooting on a 135 millimeter f1.8 lens. The fact that it's nailing focus of people moving around with a lens like that is insanely impressive. Insanely impressive. I've never shot on something that has such solid autofocus. So if you're looking for a camera to upgrade to and you don't care about file size, the A7R4 is absolutely the camera that you should be looking at. Anyways, guys, thank you a ton for watching. If you haven't seen my videos before, I upload videos like this every single week. So if you're interested in seeing more from me, definitely hit that subscribe button down below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll plan on seeing you guys next week. Peace.